Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you. Thank you for being here today. First, let me just associate myself with some of the remarks I heard from the ranking member. I want to thank Senator Risch and Senator Menendez for working with this committee to reform the Accountability Review Board process. And I just look forward to continuing to work with you to make sure the department can shift its approach to risk to make sure that we can get our diplomatic staff out into high threat environments to expand our footprint. Absolutely essential. I know it's integral to our conversation about reopening in Kyiv, but it's also really important when it comes to a lot of other dangerous places where State Department personnel need to be out on the front lines. Second, I do think Senator Cruz fundamentally misunderstands what the Global Engagement Center is. And how the mission of it is fundamentally different than the mission of the Department of Homeland Security. The mission of the Department of Homeland Security is to protect the homeland, to protect the United States from misinformation and propaganda attacks from foreign actors. The mission of the Global Engagement Center is to work with partner countries around the world to protect them and their citizens from those misinformation attacks. So, in fact, the Global Engagement Center, makes no grants to U.S. nonprofits or institutions. The Global Engagement Center, which Senator Portman and I have championed, makes grants to foreign media sources, fact checkers, watchdogs to try to combat Russian and Chinese misinformation outside of the United States. So they're fundamentally different missions. I'm not sure that there's any contention that one would steal from the others. Two questions for you, Mr. McKeon, if I can. One is just to follow up on a question I asked you, perhaps at your confirmation hearing, on the issue of subnational diplomacy. And I just want to keep on hammering this home. Here's an example of how other countries approach empowering city and state local actors to engage in diplomacy. The city of Shanghai has 100 staff dedicated to building diplomatic relationships around the world simply for the city of Shanghai. The United States has no office at a federal level, at the State Department level, dedicated to the same mission. In China, there's an 100-person office in one city dedicated to this. And so I know that you said earlier that this was, something of great interest to the Secretary. I would look forward to any update you have on efforts to reestablish an Office of Subnational City and State Diplomacy at the Department of State. We've got legislation that would do that pending before this committee. Any updates on efforts to raise the profile of our local and state actors in diplomatic efforts around the world?
Senator, it's still our intention to set up an office within the department to deal with this issue, and I believe we've identified the person to lead it. I don't know the timing. It's been hanging for a little bit, but I know we have positions identified and where it would be lodged, so I will come back to you in the next couple of weeks to give you an update.
Yeah, I just think we're leaving a lot of talent on the playing field when we don't sort of purposely organize our local elected officials, Republicans and Democrats, to represent the United States around the world. And then lastly, to back up a little bit from Senator Van Hollen's question, this year's budget request includes a 50% increase for the U.S. refugee admissions program. You set this very ambitious target for admissions from Ukraine. We haven't seen that flow really start, and my understanding is because there's a lot of work to do to rebuild USRAP from a lot of the damage that was done by the last administration. Can you just, in a minute, talk about why this budget request is so essential to be able to build back up the capacity so that we can specifically target that 100,000 number for Ukrainian admissions?
So just on the Ukrainian target of 100,000 that the president has set, I think a lot of those will end up being people coming through the United for Ukraine program that DHS has announced. They'll come in on temporary parole authority. There are some refugees through the Lautenberg program that we're trying to accelerate, and some people will just come through normal visas, family reunification, immigrant visas. On the broader refugee admissions program, we have a lot of rebuilding to do. because the program was decimated by the previous administration. The backbone, the local resettlement agencies, a lot of them went out of business. And we've been hampered in the last year plus with COVID. It's still a restriction overseas in processing refugees. And our partner, USCIS, also needs to rebuild its workforce, that they do the interviews overseas for people coming through the refugee program. The president's given us a very ambitious target. We're not going to hit it this year, but we've got to make progress so that we can hit it in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Secretary, just a couple follow-ups. The department's request for implementing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as required by several executive orders is $65.6 million. Can you give us an insight as to